Well, the 2023 Razorback recruiting cycle is coming to an end, and Arkansas has their signing class as well as a few transfers. So let's break it all down with Richard Davenport of WholeHogSports.com and the Arkansas Democrat Gazette.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I'm also the host of Out of Bounds. You can catch every weekday afternoon from 1 to 4 on 103.7 The Buzz and 103.7thebuzz.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Arkansas football has their recruiting class all set, as well as a few transfers, as signing day officially happened, which doesn't have as much pomp and circumstance as it once did, but still a big deal nonetheless. And to join us and talk all about this class is Richard Davenport of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette and WholeHogSports.com. And Richard, it's been a while, man, but appreciate you joining me. How you doing?
Doing well. It has been a while. Look forward to it.
Absolutely. So let's just look at the generally speaking recruiting class before we get into some of the specifics. How do you feel like Arkansas fared? Was this about what you expected them to do? Was it better? Was it worse? Just give us an overall pulse of what you felt about this recruiting class.
You know, going into the early signing period, it's about what I expected. You kind of heard that through the grapevine there was maybe one or two defections possibly coming up, and that's what happened. And nothing unusual. It wasn't a mass defection of prospects, but a few, and that affected the class a little bit. But overall, it's about what I expected, how they ended up, and as far as rankings and in the SEC, it's about what I expected.
So now that they have the early signing period, which a lot of these players were a part of too, I guess the one that everybody was kind of waiting on, I think Pittman even joked about it, saying that this was the Shamar Easter signing day, because that was really the big one that they were waiting from the recruiting class from high school. So what was his process like, and why was he one of the few guys, which he's a highly regarded player, but why did he wait until this signing period to sign instead of earlier during the early signing period?
Well, obviously he had a great relationship with Dow Loggins, who, now is the OC at South Carolina. And that relationship was very, very strong. So when that happened, that kind of threw him for a little bit of a loop. And it happened right before the signing period, really. So he thought it was best to make an official visit to South Carolina, which he did. And then I thought he did something very smart. Instead of trying to sign in the early signing period, make a final decision, he announced that he would visit Arkansas unofficially January the 15th, which he did, and got to know Morgan Turner, the tight ends coach, a little bit better. Morgan Turner visiting his first day on the job down in Ashdown. So I think that sent a message to Shamar that he was a priority, and then being able to go January 15th, spend a good portion of the day with Coach Pittman and Coach Turner, and just get a little bit more comfortable. I think obviously that kind of sealed it, because he said shortly afterwards he was 100% locked in. I think Coach Pittman said it right. He always wanted to go to Arkansas. He just wanted to make sure that he was making the right decision, especially with a coach that initially that was recruiting him that went elsewhere. So I thought he handled this in a very, very mature way.
Well, people are excited about him because he's highly regarded and obviously an in-state kid. And another tight end, of course, is Luke Haas, who was a player that some people were concerned about in the early signing period because of the Dow Loggins thing, but he stuck with Arkansas. So just looking at those two guys, Arkansas hasn't really had the tight ends that they did, it seemed, for a 20-year stretch, where year after year it seemed like they had Mackey Award finalists, and then you just had a kind of a draw there. But now you got two guys coming in. Just what do you make of these two particular tight ends, and can both of them play an immediate role as a true freshman in 2023?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Luke is in a better position to play immediately. He's on campus right now, where Shamar will get there after the spring semester. So Luke will be able to obviously go through off-season workouts, spring practice. He'll be ahead of Shamar. And I think he's a little bit more ahead of Shamar from a physical standpoint. That doesn't mean he's more physically gifted, but I just think he's more developed physically. And in this off season, and being on campus will help him get there even more so. So I think he's in a better position to possibly play next year. I'll be honest with you, I expect him to play next year. But with Shamar, I think if you look at him, he's got all the tools: 6'5", 225, 230 pounds, fast, very athletic. Also plays basketball, Ashdown, and also participates in track and field. I think his upside is just tremendous. He may need a year of being in the oven, so to speak, as a red shirt to get developed and be ready for that SEC type caliber competition. But at the same time, he will, like I said, after the spring semester, get on campus, and he'll have about 2 months for workouts to maybe, who knows, maybe be able to contribute next year in the fall too.
So, Richard, besides those two guys and looking at the rest of the class, is there anybody that signed with Arkansas that will be a freshman this year that you think will also make an immediate impact or at least get some significant playing time in their freshman year?
That's a good question. There's so many variables that are involved with that. Obviously you have to have the physical talent, and also just you're not overwhelmed. Head's not swimming when you get on campus. You're learning a new system, new terminology, and everything like that. But I think if you look at Jalen Braxton, he's a guy that could maybe give him some help in the 2 deep next year. He's a cornerback, 4-star cornerback from Texas, who had a very good offer list, and is probably the most highly rated of all the guys that they signed. But I think he's one to keep an eye on. I think one of the linebackers will possibly see the field next year. Carson Dean is one of them that I'm very, very high on. Great speed. He ran a leg on the 4x100 meter relay in his high school and ran like I think a 10.7 or 10.8 split, which is crazy for a 6'4", 230-pound linebacker. But then Brad Spence, another linebacker from Houston area. He's a consistent 3-star prospect, but man, he's very, very physical. Just a guy that I think physically is capable of doing that. So I think those two guys at linebacker are, you're looking at those guys that possibly doing something next season. And then I really like let me look at the list here. R.J. Johnson, defensive back, another defensive back, could play safety or cornerback for Arkansas. I think he's another one, and he's on campus. So any guy that's on campus is going to have a leg up on guys that are not on campus.
Well, the quarterback position is always one that people are interested in, and you got KJ Jefferson returning, which is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC returning. You also added Jacoby Criswell, which we'll talk about him in a second, but Malachi Singleton, I have heard so many great things, and I'm not in the pulse of recruiting, but when it comes to quarterbacks and the type of quarterback that he could be, I've heard some big time things. It seems like the quarterback room is as good right now as it's been in a while for Arkansas. So you think Singleton will be the guy that eventually could be the starter QB1 for Arkansas here in the next 2 or 3 years, or at least maybe when KJ Jefferson moves on?
Could be. I think he and Jacoby will definitely fight it out. But Malachi, according to ESPN, is the highest rated dual threat quarterback Arkansas signed in the ESPN era. KJ Jefferson was, I think, number 11. I'm just talking off the top of my head. I think he was like number 11 in the country, and Malachi is number 8 in the country. So if you just look at rankings, yeah, who knows it? But I think he has all the intangibles. He's very bright, very athletic. A guy that obviously is a true dual threat quarterback. Who, when you look at his film, he may be a little quicker and a little faster than KJ. Now, how's all that translate when he gets to Fayetteville? We'll see. But he's another one that's on campus and going through the quarterback room and getting a head start on everything. So I think the potential is there for him to be an outstanding quarterback at Arkansas. But as we know, even 5-star quarterbacks, there's no guarantee. A lot of those guys don't necessarily pan out. They end up transferring. But at the same time, if you look at his credentials, they're impressive.
We'll continue our discussion with Richard Davenport of WholeHogSports.com here in just a second. But first, folks, I got to tell you that this year, I know that everybody's excited about the big game coming up, especially when you got the Chiefs and also the Eagles is excited about it. But we're also excited about FanDuel being the latest partner here on the Locked On Podcast Network when it comes to the number one sports book in America. It is FanDuel. And that's the best thing about it, is because you might be new to it. You may not have heard it before, but because of that fact, it makes it so much easier for you to jump right in and to be a part of FanDuel. You can download now and you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you have all the things, whether it's money lines, spreads, over-unders, even down to some parlays and some prop bets. FanDuel Sportsbook is safe, secure, and super easy to use, which is the most important thing. So be sure to join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, continuing our discussion with Richard Davenport of WholeHogSports.com, as well as the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Richard, another thing, too, which has thrown in a whole new deal with this year, I guess the past few years, of course, has been the transfer portal, to which Arkansas had a few of these guys already sign and address some needs there, too. And so looking at a few of the guys there, just kind of tell us some of the players that they signed through the portal, as well as some of the players you might be really excited about seeing once they get on the field.
Well, I think you got to look at the receivers, the three big receivers, 6'4", 6'5", and 6'7". I haven't looked at what everybody else has signed at the receiver position from the portal, but it's hard to believe anybody did much better than Arkansas. All three of these guys were highly recruited coming out of the portal, and when you look at size, if you're KJ Jefferson and you're any quarterback, to be able to throw the ball to guys 6'4", 6'5", 6'7", the margin for error is so much better. I mean, that's a huge target, and it's gonna be fun for KJ throwing to those guys. So I think they did very, very good at the receiver position. I think Joshua Braun, the offensive lineman from Florida, I think he's definitely a good pickup. He'll play guard at Arkansas. He played tackle at Florida, but he'll be a guard at Arkansas. I think it's more of a natural position. That's a position that he wants to play. And then I really like the defensive lineman that they got, John Morgan III from Pittsburgh. I think he's a guy that can come off the edge. And Jeff Coate from Missouri, he was an all-SEC guy in 2020 for Missouri, and he was a guy that I think they really needed to get to kind of wrap up at least the January portal signing class. So I think they did well there, and I honestly think they did well in every position that they got out of the portal. The DBs from Baylor, obviously, very impressive. So, I think when you think about Walcott, he's a guy that played at a high level and was very, very productive last year at Baylor, and will be able to come in and play immediately at the safety position.
Going back to the wide receivers, you mentioned the size that they have, 6'4", 6'5", 6'7". I mean, that's massive. So the question that I have for you, Richard, is that kind of what Sam Pittman and this offensive staff looks for? Because they've had some size before, but to go this big where you have guys that are going to be some of the tallest guys on the field whenever they step on it, is that just the type of wide receiver that Pittman and Guyton and now Dan Enos as the OC are looking for?
Well, I think college football for the last 10, 15, 20 years have gone to the big – tried to go for the big receiver. I think it's just a coincidence that all these guys are just bigger receivers. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's a huge plus. But when you see guys that are that size, that can run that well, that can locate the ball and go for the ball and adjust to the ball in the air as well as they do, and make some of the catches that they've made and stretch the field at the same time, hey, go for those bigger receivers. Because like I said, any quarterback would love to be able to throw to those type guys because they're such big targets. I mean, you usually look at the tight end position as a position where quarterbacks see big targets. Well, you got tight end type size, at least height wise, at the receivers position at Arkansas, and that's going to be huge.
And another position I think that Razorback fans are very interested in is at the safety position because, safeties, they struggled this past year. I don't think there's any like getting around that, but they were able to add some DBs. And one guy, of course, that people might be excited about is Walcott from Baylor, the transfer there too. I know that he was considered one of the more highly regarded safeties in the transfer portal. So just what do you make of him, and also just the safety position in general for Arkansas this year? Because that was a cause of a lot of the problems they had defensively. Have they upgraded massively at that position?
I think they upgraded tremendously there. And another thing with Walcott, yeah, I mentioned this in our board and talking to him, he's a type guy. You're always concerned with transfers coming in, and do they mesh well with the culture that you have right now in your locker room? I don't think he'll have a problem at all. He's one of these guys that I think even as a transfer, I think he could potentially be one of the leaders next year just because of the type person he is. He's an outgoing type guy that seems to be team oriented. That's one thing that really kind of caught my attention. He was talking about how he really liked the team and he wanted to contribute to the team. A lot of times guys talk about their individual goals and things like that. He was talking more like a team oriented type guy. And I think it's very important because sometimes not all guys coming out of the portal, they're like that, especially because they're thinking about getting to the league, and it's all about getting to the league versus maybe not the team concept. And he's about the team concept. And I think once Arkansas fans get to know him a little bit and see some interviews, they'll see what I'm talking about because he's just a very impressive young man.
We'll continue our discussion with Richard Davenport of Arkansas Democrat, Gazette, and HoldOnSports.com here in just a second, so stay with us.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Richard, wrapping up too with the signing day and recruiting classes and everything. I know we talked some transfer portals and the excitement there too. So my question to you, is there a particular position group that Arkansas either stayed the same at? Is there one that they didn't get better at? Is there one that they still need to work on? Just kind of look at the future and maybe some things or maybe some guys that they can add in. What's position group that still needs some work going into the 2023 season?
That's a good question. I would probably say I think overall they did well, in all areas as far as the recruiting and within the portal. Just maybe another defensive lineman, defensive tackle. They got it. Excuse me, got a big one in Ian. Excuse me, Jefford. From Georgia, he's like 6'5", 6'6", about 370, and massive guy that could definitely plant himself right there over the center and be one of those guys that can hold up the gaps on either side of the center. But I think they need to add another couple more big bodies inside because I think they got the edge guys out of the portal, but I think with the defensive lineman that they signed from high school, Caleb James being one of them, I think he's a guy that will eventually move inside, even though it all depends on how much weight he gains. He's about 6'5", about 260 right now. But if he gains, obviously another 30, 40 pounds, he'll move inside. And I think he has the capability of being outstanding on the inside. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him go inside versus outside because he, like I said, he could play either one, but I think eventually he'll be inside.
And Richard, there's also been a lot of turnover with the coaching staff, a lot of new coaches, some familiar faces. We mentioned Dan Enos. You have pretty much a whole new defensive staff minus Deke Adams who stayed on. But just from what you know about these assistant coaches and maybe how they handled the recruiting during this period, How do you feel like are some of their strengths, especially in the states that maybe they'll be able to really hit home, and just their recruiting prowess and their abilities? How have they fared so far just with these new coaches being coming in?
I think it's kind of early to fully know. I think we'll know that probably more as we go through the spring and during the summer. But what I've been impressed with Travis Williams, the defensive coordinator, and talking to, say, Charleston Collins, one of the top prospects in the state at Mills, the defensive lineman. He made it a visit to Arkansas January the 13th. After talking to Coach Williams, he came back the following week, and he was supposed to go to Texas. So he basically he was really impressed with Coach Williams, just the vibe that he got from him, the energy. I think he's going to bring just a different element that Arkansas maybe hasn't had at the defensive coordinator position as a recruiter. He's very relatable to the kids, but every guy that I talk to that talks to him talks about his energy level. And hey, kids like that. They like that. I think with Marcus Woodson, the co-defensive coordinator, I think his ties to Mississippi are huge, along with Deke Adams. Deke obviously has already been on the staff, but both of those guys are Mississippi natives, and I've noticed the last month or so many more offers going out, and they've had some kids from Mississippi visit Arkansas. And Mississippi hasn't really been a big recruiting area for Arkansas through the years. They've gotten a few here or there. They got one this year, and Alex Sanford, the linebacker from Oxford, Mississippi. But they haven't really made a lot of hay through the years in the state of Mississippi. So we'll see what happens there. I think there's potential for Arkansas maybe to get one or two guys out of that state on a consistent basis, with Coach Woodson and Deke Adams being on staff. But with Coach Wilson being a New Orleans native, I think he'll probably recruit the lower part of Louisiana. And I think it's another area that Arkansas, with Michael Smith, a former receivers coach at Arkansas, really did a lot of hay back in the day, along with Fitz Hill. Louisiana used to be a big state for Arkansas, and they got quite a few guys out of there. Just they really haven't had anybody that had a lot of ties to the state until Coach Wilson showed up. So it's early, but at least with Coach Williams and Woodson, I've seen a little bit of work to judge by. With Coach Wilson, it's still early.
All right, before I let you get out of here, Richard, it's never too early, I guess, to look at 2024 and that recruiting class. Just how is it shaping up so far, and what some of the things that you think can be going on with that? Is it going to be another great recruiting class for Sam Pittman?
Well, you got Kavion Henderson, who defensive end from Alabama, who Alabama wanted, Auburn wanted. They still want. They're still recruiting him. That was a huge, huge get. Matter of fact, that may be one of the best gets Arkansas has had in a long, long time from out of state, to go in and beat Alabama and beat Auburn. Arkansas has been able to go into Texas, go into Florida, and a few other places and beat the in-state schools, the big in-state schools. But it doesn't happen a lot. To be able to go in and beat Alabama, that's impressive. Now you got to hold on to him. But and he was on campus last weekend again, so that's promising. As far as the 24 class in-state, they got 8 guys that have offers from the Razorbacks. That's above average. You still have till December for other guys to maybe get offers, but you got a lot of guys that you can rely on there if you can get them to jump on board. That's huge, because that lessens the number of guys you have to go out of state and get. But we'll see. It looks like Walker White from Little Rock Christian, the 4-star quarterback, will be making a decision on Friday. We'll see what happens there. That would be huge. But I think right now it's kind of early. But and especially with the new coaches on staff, you're probably going to have to see. You may not see as many commitments in March or April that you see in the past, because these new coaches have to develop relationships with guys and get them on campus multiple times. But you may see that come in June or July or August where more guys jump on board. But at the same time, in recruiting, you never know. But I do think that relationships take a while to build and to be able to get guys on campus with the new coaches.
Richard Davenport, covering all things Razorback recruiting. You can follow him on Twitter at AR Recruiting Guy. You can also check out his stuff on WholeHogSports.com, as well as the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Richard, really appreciate you joining us, man. As always, it's really great to catch up with a little recruiting, man, and enjoy a little time until it gets busy once again, I'm sure, there as the football offseason comes along.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, John.